Jesus' name, everybody said, amen. You guys may be seated. I don't know what just happened. That was not planned. That did not happen first service. I did not know that was coming. So I don't know what I looked like just then. So you're going to have to forgive me. Maybe my wife has rhythm. And so I guess if we're one, maybe it jumped on me. I don't know. I want to say it's nice to have you with us this morning, Megan. Megan just went through surgery, so would you guys just give it up? She's in the building today. Happy to see you. I want to honor, I've been looking forward to this day for a long time. I want to honor two more people. Hold your applause. I'll tell you when to applause because I got to say some good stuff about him first. Daniel and Katie, would you guys just raise your hands for me? Daniel, he is when I say my best friend, other than Samantha herself, Daniel is my best friend of all time. He has been with me through the hardest seasons of my life and through the best. He was in my wedding. He was pretty much a roommate with me for going on 4 years. And then Katie is here as well. Katie's his girlfriend. We have gotten to know Katie over just the past few months even. She's just amazing. We got to do a little bit of traveling with her at one point on the same ministry team. And they're here today, one, because of course they wanted to see me and Sam, but two, because they heard about what was happening in McKenzie, Tennessee, and they wanted to taste it for themselves. So would you guys just give it up for Daniel and Katie this morning? Such an honor to have you guys here. Been waiting to honor you for a long time now. I want to honor one more group of people before we jump in. This is just what we do at Overflow. We just honor everybody. I see someone doing something right, and I'm just like, I'm just give you a shout out. I don't know anything else to do. Let me buy your meal. Let me talk about you. I don't know, but I want to give some more honor. Raise your hand if you were a part of our yard sale this past weekend. Is anybody in here? Yes. So if you don't know, this past weekend, we were a part of a citywide yard sale. It happened inside of the new facility that Josh and I were mentioning earlier. And I love it because it wasn't like my idea or someone else's idea. It was an idea that spawned out of Matthew Page's small group. I'm pretty sure Mason and Lauren Powers kind of headed this thing up, and there was a ton of other people that helped with it. So if I'm not mentioning your name right now, don't hold that against me. I don't know everyone that helped with it, but I know Mason and Lauren and like Wes and some other people really headed it up, put some manpower into this thing because they knew that we have a need. They heard that we had bought the building. They know that we got to raise some money. And so they thought, I don't have much to give, but I got a bunch of junk. What could I do with that? Oh, we should have a yard sale. So they put together this yard sale where they didn't just bring together collectively all of our old stuff. People from other churches were donating stuff to this. And we raised over $3,000 at a yard sale. So thank you guys for the work and the effort. It has not gone unnoticed. We appreciate that. And if there's anything that like is a perfect picture of what Overflow Church is, it's that. People not needing to be asked to come alongside the vision. People who are owning this church and owning the future of this church for themselves, knowing it's not, I wish it could just be my job. I wish I could just will it into existence. Did you like my noise effect? I don't know what that was. But I wish I could do that, but I can't. It takes a group of people who can come together in unity and say, I can't do it all, but I can play my part. If there is anything that describes this church to a T, it is that. So Overflow, would you guys just give it up for yourselves? For what an amazing group of people you guys are. It is so inspiring, and I'm so excited for what the summer has for us. In my heart of hearts, I believe we're about to embark upon the greatest summer in the history of Overflow Church. I believe that everything that's coming this summer is going to not only shake the core of us, it's going to shake the core of McKenzie, it's going to shake West Tennessee, and it's going to reach a lot further than that. And so with that being said, I want to get you ready because normally we start another series after we're done. And we just recently finished our series called This Changes Everything. Did anyone enjoy that series? I enjoyed it. It's by far been my favorite series that we've done thus far since I've been here. And so normally I would get up here today and say, we're starting a new series. But I'm not doing that because we are going to start a new series in a few weeks. But today, I have a standalone message. It's not in a series. And next week is Mother's Day. I didn't want to start a series and then take a break for Mother's Day and then get back into it. That was going to be confusing. So today I've got this kind of like a solo message that's pretty personal to our church. It'll be good. And I want you to get ready this summer because that may happen a few times. We may not always be in the middle of a series. There may be some standalone messages, but I can promise you this. Everything that is talked about from this pulpit is going to be so intentional for where we're headed as a church. Because I want us to be ready for all that God has for us. And I don't know if you guys can feel it in the air, but there's momentum right now. There's passion. There's just electricity surrounding everything that we do. And we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that we use that for all that it's worth. And your response to this message and to the messages going forward are going to set the tone and pave the way for where we are going as a church. And I'm telling you, where we are going will be 100 times better than anywhere we've been thus far. So with that being said, we're going to be in Genesis chapter number 41 today. The title of our message, for those of you who are taking notes, is called Letting Go. Everyone say that with me. Say, letting go. We're going to be talking about a guy named Joseph. And there's two Josephs. There's probably more than two Josephs, but there's two really popular Josephs in the Bible. One is Jesus' earthly father, but we're not talking about him today. Because the other Joseph, it's the story of Joseph with the coat of many colors. The same guy who gets sold into slavery and who interprets Pharaoh's dreams. It's that Joseph. It's the Joseph we talked about in my first ever series here at Overflow called Time to Dream. So that's what we're going to be talking about. We'll be in Genesis chapter number 41. We'll start at verse 43, and this is what it says. It says, wherever Joseph went, the command was shouted, kneel down. So Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of all Egypt. And Pharaoh said to him, I'm Pharaoh, but no one will lift a hand or a foot in the entire land of Egypt without your approval. Then Pharaoh gave Joseph a new Egyptian name, I did it first service, and I'm doing it again right now. And I normally have this down. I practiced it all week so that this wouldn't happen, and then it happened. Zaphanath-Paneah. Why Pharaoh would be like, okay, Joseph to Zaphanath-Paneah? I don't know. He made it so hard on everybody, on all of us. Why would he do that? But he did. And it says he also gave him a wife whose name was Asenath. She was the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On. So Joseph took charge of the entire land of Egypt. He was 30 years old when he began serving in the court of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And when Joseph left Pharaoh's presence, he inspected the entire land of Egypt. As predicted, for 7 years, the land produced bumper crops. Now we're going to jump down to verse number 50, and this is what it says. It says, during this time, talking about that time where the land is producing everything, it says, before the first of the famine years, 2 sons were born to Joseph and his wife, Asenath. Joseph named his older son Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my troubles and everyone in my father's family. And Joseph named his second son Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in this land of my grief. Now Joseph, we find our boy Joseph in a really good season of life. He is making money. He is getting promotions. He found himself a cute young Middle Eastern girl, married her, and on top of it, he's having some kids. This guy, he's in the middle of his come up. He's on the mountaintop. And that's so good, and you got to be happy for Joseph. Because right before this great season, he had just gone through 13 years of what is easily the worst season of his life ever. He went through 13 years of betrayal and letdown and heartache and hurt, right? Before this season, he interprets all these dreams in prison that should have gotten him out of the prison, and they didn't. Before that, he was wrongfully thrown into prison for something that he didn't do. And then before that, he was sold into slavery by his brothers who then lied to their father about what happened to him. Joseph is a guy who I think it's safe to say he had some pretty legitimate reasons to be offended. He went through 13 years of what is probably worse than any amount of years that you or I have ever experienced in our lives. And yet, all it takes is about 2 minutes on the internet to realize how steeped in offense and bitterness, we really are. And when I say we, I'm not just referring to people in general, because yeah, people in general, but I'm referring to church people, because that's you and I. We are church people. And it seems like it takes nothing to offend people these days. It takes nothing for us to get offended. We get offended at how people pray. We get offended at the songs that are sang in church. We get offended by what high school somebody went to. You went to Huntington? You're not welcome in my church. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've heard it since I've been here, this big rivalry. We get offended at the clothes that people wear. We get offended when somebody comments on our Facebook page and like doesn't like it. You know, like when we leave a comment and they don't like it, and we get offended. And we're petty, and it's okay. I mean, it's who we are. And I say we because we're all wrapped up in this. And even if you truly believe in your heart, you know, I've never dealt with offense or getting mad or bitter at somebody, I just want to remind you about the time that the referee made the bad call on your kid. I've been there. I've seen the crowds, the high school football games, the people who go to church on Sundays but are cussing the referees out on Friday nights. I've been there. It's crazy, okay? I want to remind you of the time that she didn't reply to your text. I want to remind you of the time that he didn't come through for you when he said that he was going to come through for you. And how we respond when that stuff happens, and especially when someone else gets offended at us, is we always seem to respond in offense. You know, just proving at how bitter and offended we actually can get. What happens, someone does us wrong, and I've seen it only a million times. We make a Facebook post. It's really vague. And nobody in the world except for you and that person knows what that post even means. But you know that they're going to see it. And so you post it on there because you're mad and you're offended, or you leave a mean comment, or you talk about them behind their back. And it's just, we're just petty sometimes. I mean, welcome to America, you know, where you talk bad about me or you talk bad about my church, and I'm ready to go to war with you. Meanwhile, in China, Christians are getting taught how to lead their executioners to the Lord so that just one more person can get saved. It's a big deal. We deal with offense. If there's anything that the internet has made glaringly obvious, it's that the American church has two really loud issues. One, we have a total lack of self-control as it pertains to our sexuality. And two, we are dominated by offense. So I want you to hear this, and I want you to hear it clearly. When you surrendered your life to Jesus, you surrendered your right to getting offended. Now, I say this knowing I've been bitten by the bitter bug a time or two. Say that with me. Say, bitten by the bitter bug. Jesse said this last week to me, and I loved it. He was like, I've been bitten by the bitter bug. And I heard it, and I was like, that sounds great. I'm going to make everyone say that. So I've been bitten by the bitter bug a time or two. Daniel, he can attest to this. He's been there with me. I've been bitten by the bitter bug a time or 10, okay? It's nothing new to me. And it's taken a toll on me. It's almost destroyed me a few times. And it didn't just destroy me. It didn't just destroy me emotionally or mentally. It destroyed me spiritually. It even destroyed me physically. I've been the guy who was so angry that he couldn't sleep at night. But on the flip side, I've also been the guy that was so hurt that all I wanted to do was sleep because I didn't want to think about all the hurt that was happening in my life. I've been the guy who didn't trust any of my leaders and who hated everyone that was above me and everyone in church, and I didn't want to be around any of them. I've been the guy who lost a ton of weight because I was so hurt I couldn't eat and I was throwing up at nighttime. But I've also been the guy who gained a ton of weight because all I did was binge eat and watch really sad movies. How I insert a joke in the middle of that, I don't know. It's like, I'm just letting you guys know how much of like a teenage girl I actually am. And I'm not afraid to say that. But I say that to let you know that I've been there. I've experienced that before. And I think of all the things that we deal with as believers, unforgiveness is the most ironic of them all. Because the heartbeat of Christianity is forgiveness, right? We have this God who has given us this unearned, undeserved mercy and grace by forgiving all of our past, present, and future sins. And how do we respond to that? We hold grudges against every single person that has ever done anything wrong to us. And it doesn't make any sense, because when you start to think about it, God's thought on the subject is, okay, well, I've chosen to forgive you, whether you deserved it or not. So why would it be so hard for you in turn to extend that same kind of forgiveness to other people when they don't deserve it? It's why we read Colossians 3:13, and it says, bear with each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you, seeing as God has forgiven you first. It's why when we say the Lord's Prayer, which I know everyone here said it because you played any sport in the South, you start your game off with it, right? Because it's some good luck charm. We're not like actually praying it. Let's get real. We're just saying it with the team because that's what we do. But when you say it, this is what you say. It said, forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who have trespassed against us. And I find it interesting that it doesn't say if we trespass those who have trespassed against us. We say as we forgive those who have trespassed against us. Because it's not a matter of if we're supposed to forgive. It is a matter of when. It's a matter of we have to forgive. There are a lot of gray areas within Scripture. There's a lot of places that have tension and that scholars debate with and struggle with. But this is not one of those areas. This is black and white. If you surrender your life to Jesus, then you in turn are surrendering your right to be offended. And while simple obedience should be enough, it should be enough to say, well, God says I need to forgive people, so I'm just going to do that. If we're honest, sometimes it's not enough. And we as people, we like to know, well, why? Why should I forgive them, God? They did this mean thing to me, and I don't want to. And luckily, God, in His mercy, He is willing to give us a reason behind why it is that we forgive people. Now, I want us to pay close attention to Joseph's kids' names, and their names are going to come up again and again through this sermon. But when we hear their names, you can pretty well conclude that Joseph went through some intense bitterness at some point in his life. His first kid's name means forgetting all of the past troubles that plagued me when I was with my family. Like, he literally named his kids like from the stuff that happened to him. All this awful stuff that he was going through, it was so real to him, he named his kid by it. And then he names his second kid, and you think, he's all right, this is good. And it starts off like this: fruitfulness in the land, and then it ends with, in my grief. Make sure to include it in there. We can see that this guy, Joseph, he's been through some pretty intense stuff in his life. But I want to note the details surrounding this season of Joseph. I want you to notice that in the season of Joseph's bitterness and his pain and his resentment toward his brothers and towards Potiphar's wife and Potiphar and even the cupbearer, we only find Joseph living in two places. One, he is either a slave, or two, he is either in prison. And I think that's important to know because bitterness is a self-inflicted prison sentence. Now, let me go into that real quick. I want to read a story. It's going to be a long story. It's all good, but this story, it preaches for itself. All right, it's going to be in Matthew chapter number 18. This is Jesus telling this story. It says, Peter came to Jesus and he asked, Lord, how often should I forgive someone who sins against me? 7 times? Jesus, he goes, no, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king who decided to bring his accounts up to date with his servants who had borrowed money from him. In the process, one of his debtors was brought in who owed him millions of dollars. He couldn't pay, so his master ordered that he be sold along with his wife, his children, and everything he owned to pay the debt. The man fell down before his master and he begged him, please be patient with me and I'll pay it all. And then his master was filled with pity for him and he released him and forgave his debt entirely. But when the man left the king, he went to a fellow servant who owed him a few $1,000s. He grabbed him by the throat and demanded instant payment. His fellow servant fell down before him, begged for a little bit more time. Be patient with me and I'll pay it, he pleaded. But his creditor wouldn't wait. He had the man arrested and put in prison until the debt could be paid in full. And when some of the other servants saw this, they were pretty upset. So they went to the king and they told him everything that had happened. And the king called in the man he had forgiven and he said, you evil servant. I forgave you that tremendous debt because you pleaded with me. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just like I had mercy on you? And the angry king sent the man to prison to be tortured until he had paid his entire debt. So the master in this story, he expects this servant who has experienced this amazing grace, this unearned forgiveness, to then in turn extend that forgiveness to the people in his life. And it's a pretty easy picture that Jesus is presenting here. God, he's chosen to forgive us of all the things that we've done. So in return, we should be choosing to forgive others of the things that they've done. And forgiveness is a choice. And I know that we know that. Forgiveness doesn't just happen. You don't just wake up one day and, oh, I've forgiven them. You got to choose to forgive. But in the same light, offense is also a choice. You get to choose whether or not you're offended. And this servant, it says he chose to be offended. He chose bitterness. And what he did is he goes and he chokes the guy. And in doing so, he refuses to let that guy go. And his bitterness toward that guy actually got him thrown into prison. Because bitterness and unforgiveness is a prison that you put yourself in. It is a self-inflicted prison sentence. That's why in Matthew 6, Jesus, he says, if you're willing to forgive people who've done you wrong, and you don't refuse forgiving them, then your heavenly Father, he's not going to refuse forgiving you. But if you're unwilling to forgive the people who've done you wrong, then don't expect to encounter that same kind of forgiveness in your own life. Why? Because holding on to forgiveness, to unforgiveness, isn't hurting anybody except for you. That's why you have to be willing to let people go. I know you've heard this 1,000 times, but bitterness is like drinking poison and expecting it to hurt the other person. It doesn't work like that. And Job's friend in chapter 18, he says it so perfectly. He looks at Job and he says, dude, your anger isn't hurting anybody except for you. While you're losing sleep about it, they're getting 8 hours of beauty rest. While you're binge eating ice cream about this whole thing, he's in the gym working on his six-pack. While you're ready to quit your job, she's getting ready to walk into a promotion. While you think about it all day, every day, they haven't thought about it in months. And no matter how mad and angry and bitter and resentful you get, the only person in this situation who is experiencing any kind of pain is you. And that's why you have to be willing to let them go. And don't be afraid, because you letting them go and you walking in forgiveness, it's not communicating that what they did was right or okay. It's just communicating that what they did or what they said isn't going to hold you back from your destiny anymore. It's communicating that I'm done letting them decide how I feel. I'm going to take control about how I feel. So Joseph, no matter how bitter, no matter how upset you are, no matter what they've done to you, if they've lied about you, if they've left you, if they've betrayed you, if they've talked in ways about you that they shouldn't, if they've caused the deepest pain that you've ever gone through, Jesus, he presents to us an escape from the prison of resentment. And it's through forgiveness and it's through letting go. And now, know this, letting go is a process. It may not happen overnight. Forgiveness, it may not happen all at once, and that's okay. You got to be willing to embrace the process. This is why when Peter asked, he says, Lord, should I forgive him 7 times and then I'll be done? Jesus, he comes along, he says, no, sir. He said, believe me, you think 7 times is enough? It's going to take 7 times, 70 times. Because Jesus knows it may not take the first time. Those feelings, they're going to rise back up in you. And then you're going to have to forgive. And then guess what's going to happen? Those feelings, they're going to rise back up in you. And then you're going to have to choose to forgive. And then those feelings, after you've chosen to forgive 3, 4, 5 times, guess what? They're going to pop back up in you. And you're going to have to choose to forgive over and over. You may have to choose to forgive somebody 490 times before it takes. But eventually, Jesus says, it will take. It will. And you'll get to walk into freedom. I remember one time, I had a girl in my youth group. And she had just gone through some pretty traumatic experience with her mother and her father. Her father had made some huge mistakes. It caused some friction within their family, and it left her really angry at him, really upset over the whole situation. But she was just done with it. Their family was moving on from it, and she felt like she wasn't moving on from it. And so she came to me and she's like, Alex, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm done dealing with this bitterness towards my dad. I want to love him. He's trying his hardest. I can see that, and I want to be done with it. And so I told her about the chair method, and let me explain to you about what that is. And this is what she did. That night, after youth service, she went into her garage, and she sat one chair down, and she sat in it, and she had another chair there that was empty. And in that chair, she imagined her dad being in that chair. She sat down, and she disclosed all of her feelings, and then she looked at her dad, who is obviously there in the spirit. He's not actually there. And she says, Dad, I forgive you. And you want to know what happened? Nothing. She had to get back up, cool off for a second. She had to sit back down and do it again. And then she had to do it again. And then she had to do it again. And then 2 hours later, finally, she finds herself on the floor of her garage under the power of God. Because when she chose to embrace the process of forgiveness, he came through for her, and she experienced breakthrough that night, and she never had to sit back in that chair because she left that garage completely free of any pain, of any bitterness that happened to her. And I've even heard of other people saying that they've written letters where they're able to express their feeling through writing the letter, and they'll get up and they'll read the letter, and they'll be by themselves. And hear me, they did that, and they did not send the letter to the person that they're offended at. Okay? You don't always have to approach the person that did you wrong in person. Sometimes that's actually the worst thing that you can do. You got to remember, forgiveness has nothing to do with them. Forgiveness only has to do with you. It doesn't matter what they do. Forgiveness is your responsibility. And so this happened to me one time. It's at the end of a church service. I've had an awesome service. And this dude walks up to me and he goes, Hey, Alex, man, I just want to let you know I forgive you. He goes, man, I feel so much better after saying that. Like, all right, man, you have a good day. And I'm like, well, sorry. I have no idea what I did to him. We weren't friends. I've never even had a formal conversation with the guy, really. And because he came to me in person and did that, maybe he felt better, but it caused all kinds of stuff to rise up in me. It wasn't helpful for me at all. So let me say this, and to hopefully clear up some of your ideas on what forgiveness is not reconciliation. They're two totally different things. You can forgive somebody without ever experiencing reconciliation. You do not have to have a conversation with that person to forgive them. They do not have to apologize to you for you to forgive them. Sometimes reconciliation isn't even an option. Sometimes they're not ready for reconciliation. Sometimes they're remarried already, and you can't just go and pop in the house and say, what's up? Sometimes they've passed away, and reconciliation literally isn't even a problem. But that's okay, because the only person responsible for forgiveness taking place in your heart is you. And you're going to know when you've won the battle, because you're going to be able to think about those people, and you're not going to feel the pain anymore. And I know for some of you that seems like such a distant reality, but let me encourage you, it is still a reality. You can get past it. You can let go. You can move on. You can experience freedom from this. And it may take work. It may take you really embracing the process and being intentional about it for a long time. But let me encourage you with this. Letting go is worth it. It's worth it every single time. There's a freedom that you get to walk in when you decide to let people go. Read this verse with me. Matthew chapter number 11. It says, Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I'm humble and gentle at heart, and you're going to find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden that I give you is light." God, He offers us peace and rest in exchange for our burdens and our bitterness. And this is what the offer looks like. He says, you can take on my yoke, and you can pick up my burdens, which are light and which you can easily carry because I'm going to be there. But here's the thing. You don't get to pick up his rest until you lay down your burdens. You don't get to walk in your purpose until you let go of your pain. God, he wants to propel you forward, but before he can do that, you're going to have to be willing to leave some things behind. Real quickly, let's look at Joseph's children's names one more time, because I feel like there's just a little bit more that God has for us in the names of these kids. His first son, his name is Manasseh. And the Bible says this. Manasseh means God has made me forget all of my troubles and everything that happened to me and my father's family. This is a picture of where Joseph's at in his life right now. He's moved on. He's let him go. He has moved past the pain, and he's forgiven what has happened to him in the past. And then it says, him and his wife give birth to Ephraim. And Ephraim means God has made me fruitful in the land of my grief. And I believe through these sons' names that God is communicating to us that Manasseh being birthed, forgiveness being birthed first, paves the way for Ephraim, or for the land of fruitfulness, to follow closely after. It's this idea that forgiveness precedes fruitfulness. What am I saying? I'm saying that the forgiveness you extend in this season determines your fruitfulness in the next. You forgive now, it equals healing then. You forgive now, it puts you in line for blessing then. You forgive now, you get to walk in purpose then. But if you don't forgive now, don't expect to walk in favor then, because Manasseh has to come before Ephraim. Forgiveness has to come before healing. Forgiveness has to come before you get rid of all those different thoughts. Hear me. We can't expect to walk into the land of blessing until we have first walked through the process of forgiveness. For many of you in here today, this sermon is touching different parts of your lives. This sermon is dealing with some of your marriages, with some of your friendships, with some of the people you work with your family. Maybe your parents treated you like dirt. Maybe they did make all the wrong choices. Maybe you need to forgive God. I don't know, but in a moment, this room is going to turn into a place of healing and forgiveness and of letting go for some people. You're going to lay your burdens down, and you're going to walk out of here today lighter. You're going to walk out of here today a different person. But first, I want to address a specific group of people in the room. All right, now, I'm speaking to those of you who have been here with Overflow for an extended period of time. Those of you who have been here for more than 6 months, those of you who have been here for a couple years, because some of the stories that I've been told about those few years, it seems like those few years really sucked. And for some of you, you went through pain and heartache and misery, and you lost friends, and you got talked about, and a lot of other stuff happened. But let me remind you, literally speaking, we're about to move into a new land. And we are about to move into a new season. And it doesn't matter what building we're in. If you want to pursue the destiny that's on your life, if we want to become the church that God is asking us to become, if we want to reach the people that God has for us, then we have to decide right now that we are letting go of that season and we're moving forward, because we can't expect to walk into the land of blessing until we first walked through a season of forgiveness. I want to invite you guys to stand up on your feet with us this morning. Now, if what I said doesn't apply to you, don't worry about it. Those days are dead and gone. They're in the past. They're not coming back anytime soon. And even if none of that made sense to you and you weren't here for it, it's okay, because my good sense tells me that this message probably touched some other areas in your life. So today, we're going to do something just a little bit different. What I want you to do is I want you to stick your hands out in front of you like this. Everyone in the room, both hands, I want you to squeeze as hard as you can, and I want you to just close your eyes right now. And with your eyes closed and your hands squeezed, I want you to think about all the people that have betrayed you, that have let you down. I want you to think about the person that left you. Maybe it's your ex, maybe it's your parents. I want you to let those people flash through your mind. And right now, you've got a hold of those people, okay? And in a moment, what we're going to do is on the count of 3, we're going to open our hands as wide as we can, and we're just going to shout, and we're going to say, I forgive you. And when you do, the forgiveness and the power of God is going to sweep across this room, and you're going to encounter something that you would have never imagined encountering in one moment. Because let me tell you, if you let Him, God can do in one moment what would take man 10 years to do. So when we do this and the band starts and we count down to 3, if you need to come up to the altar, if you need prayer, if you need to get out of your seats and encounter God in whatever way you need to do it, you are officially free to do it when this happens, all right? So are we ready? With those people in your mind, on the count of 3, let's get ready to open up those hands wide, and we're going to shout in faith, all right? Here we go. If you guys are ready. 1, 2, 3. Come on. I forgive you. And you may have to say it over